Let me start with a surprising question. What if one simple food could reduce inflammation in the body faster than turmeric, the spice that's been praised for decades as one of the most powerful natural anti-inflammatory compounds? Now, turmeric is certainly beneficial. Its active compound, curcumin, has been studied for its ability to calm inflammatory pathways. But here's what many people, especially seniors, don't realize. There is another food that works directly on the biological mechanisms of inflammation, influencing immune signaling, cellular repair, and even the aging process itself. And the science behind it is remarkably strong. In fact, clinical studies show that certain nutrients found in this food can lower inflammatory markers like interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor, two molecules that drive chronic inflammation in the body. In one randomized controlled trial involving middle-aged and older adults, supplementation with omega-3 fatty acids significantly reduced inflammatory cytokines compared with a placebo group. Now, why does this matter so much as we age? Because after the age of about 50, the body naturally develops something scientists call inflammaging. This is a slow, chronic, low-grade inflammation that quietly damages tissues over time. It affects the joints, it affects the brain, it affects the blood vessels, and perhaps most importantly, it affects metabolic health. Inflammation interferes with insulin signaling, it stresses the liver, it raises cortisol levels, and it accelerates many of the diseases we associate with aging, including heart disease, arthritis, type 2 diabetes, and cognitive decline. So if we want to support healthy aging, the goal is not simply to mask inflammation. The goal is to turn off the biological signals that create it in the first place. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Inflammation behaves like a fire alarm system. When there is injury or infection, the alarm goes off, and that's actually healthy. It helps your immune system respond. But in many older adults, the alarm never fully turns off. It keeps ringing in the background, day after day, year after year, and that constant signal gradually wears down the body. Now, here's the fascinating part. Certain foods don't just reduce inflammation. They actually help your body produce molecules that actively resolve inflammation, turning the alarm system off. And one of the most powerful foods for doing this contains nutrients that your body converts into compounds called resolvins and protectins, specialized molecules that calm immune activity and repair tissue damage. In other words, this food doesn't just block inflammation. It helps your body finish the healing process properly. And for seniors, that can make an enormous difference in energy levels, joint comfort, heart health, and even brain function. So today, I want to break this down clearly and practically. We're going to talk about why inflammation increases with age, why turmeric alone may not be enough, the one food that directly shuts down inflammatory pathways, and how to use it in a simple weekly protocol that supports metabolic health and longevity. And if you stay with me until the end, I'll also share a simple routine. Many longevity researchers recommend for people over 50 to dramatically reduce chronic inflammation naturally. Because when you understand how to calm inflammation at the root level, you're not just treating symptoms, you're helping your body age differently. Let's start with the root of the problem. Why does inflammation increase as we age? Because once you understand this process, the solution becomes much clearer. Scientists use a term called inflammaging. It describes the slow, persistent inflammation that develops in the body over time as we grow older. It's not the kind of inflammation you see when you sprain your ankle or get an infection. That type is acute and temporary. Inflammaging is different, it's quiet, it's chronic, and it often goes unnoticed for years. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Think of your immune system like a home security system. When an intruder breaks in, the alarm sounds. The police arrive, the situation is handled, then the alarm turns off. That's how inflammation is supposed to work. But with aging, the alarm system becomes overly sensitive. It begins detecting threats where there aren't any. Old immune cells linger in the body longer than they should. Damaged cells accumulate, and small inflammatory signals start firing constantly in the background. The alarm never fully shuts off. Over time, this chronic inflammation begins affecting nearly every system in the body. It stiffens blood vessels. It irritates joints. It damages the lining of the gut. It even affects the brain. Research published in the Journal of Gerontology shows that elevated inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein and interleukin-6 are strongly associated with frailty, cardiovascular disease, and cognitive decline in older adults. But inflammation doesn't just affect aging diseases. It directly affects metabolism. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine insulin as a key that unlocks the door of your cells so glucose can enter and be used for energy. Now imagine inflammation as rust building up in that lock. When inflammation rises, the insulin signal becomes weaker. The door doesn't open as easily. Your pancreas compensates by producing more insulin, and higher insulin levels signal the body to store fat instead of burning it. This is one of the hidden reasons many people gain weight as they age, even if their diet hasn't changed much. Inflammation is silently altering the body's metabolic signals, but it doesn't stop there. Chronic inflammation also places stress on the liver, the organ responsible for managing blood sugar, cholesterol, and detoxification. When the liver is inflamed, it begins producing more triglycerides and inflammatory molecules, which further amplify the cycle. So inflammation becomes self-perpetuating. More inflammation leads to more metabolic dysfunction, and more metabolic dysfunction leads to more inflammation. This is why reducing inflammation is one of the most powerful strategies for supporting healthy aging, not just for joints, not just for heart health, but for energy, metabolism, and longevity. Now, here's where many people go wrong. They try to suppress inflammation with a single supplement: turmeric, curcumin capsules, or anti-inflammatory pills. But inflammation isn't just a switch that you turn off. Your body actually has a biological system designed to resolve inflammation naturally, to shut down the immune response and begin healing. And the nutrients required for that system come primarily from specific foods. In the next section, we're going to talk about why turmeric, despite its popularity, often isn't the most effective tool, and why another food activates a completely different anti-inflammatory pathway that the body desperately needs as it ages. And if this breakdown is helpful so far, consider subscribing to the channel. Every day we explore practical, science-based strategies to help you support metabolism, energy, and longevity naturally. Now let's take a closer look at why turmeric isn't always enough, and what the research is starting to reveal. Now let's talk about turmeric. Turmeric has earned a reputation as one of the most powerful anti-inflammatory foods in the world. Its active compound, curcumin, has been studied extensively for its ability to reduce inflammatory pathways in the body, and the research behind it is real. Studies show curcumin can inhibit inflammatory signaling molecules such as NF-κB, a protein complex that plays a major role in triggering inflammation. When NF-κB is activated, it stimulates the release of inflammatory cytokines like interleukin-1, interleukin-6, and TNF-alpha. So turmeric can help reduce those signals. But here's the key issue most people don't realize. Turmeric works mainly by blocking inflammation, not resolving it. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine inflammation like firefighters responding to a building fire. Blocking inflammation is like telling the firefighters to stop spraying water. Resolving inflammation is different. Resolving inflammation means the fire has actually been put out, the smoke has cleared, and the building is being repaired. Your body has a specialized biological system designed to do exactly that. It produces compounds called specialized pro-resolving mediators, or SPMs. These include molecules known as resolvins, protectins, and mycins. And their job is not just to reduce inflammation, but to actively turn the inflammatory response off once the danger has passed. This process is incredibly important for healthy aging because in many seniors, the body loses its ability to efficiently produce these resolving molecules. The inflammatory signals continue, but the off switch becomes weaker. Now here's where the research gets fascinating. These inflammation-resolving molecules are not produced from turmeric. They are produced from omega-3 fatty acids, particularly EPA and DHA. These are the healthy fats found in certain types of fish. When your body consumes EPA and DHA, enzymes convert them into resolvins and protectins, molecules that literally signal immune cells to stop attacking tissues and begin the healing process. In fact, research published in Nature Reviews Immunology has shown that these molecules help stop excessive immune activity, clear damaged cells, and promote tissue repair. In other words, they finish the inflammatory cycle properly. Without them, inflammation can linger in the body for years. And that lingering inflammation is what contributes to many age-related diseases. Now, here's another challenge with turmeric. Even though curcumin has powerful properties, the body absorbs very little of it. In fact, studies show that curcumin has extremely low bioavailability unless it is combined with substances like piperine, a compound found in black pepper. This means that simply adding turmeric to food, while healthy, may not deliver enough active compounds to significantly influence inflammation. This is why relying on turmeric alone often doesn't produce dramatic results for chronic inflammation. What the body often needs instead is a steady supply of nutrients that activate the inflammation resolution system. And this brings us to the food that researchers repeatedly find to be one of the most powerful anti-inflammatory foods on the planet: fatty fish, specifically fish rich in omega-3 fatty acids. In the next section, we're going to explore why foods like salmon, sardines, and mackerel have such profound effects on inflammation, and how they influence not only the immune system, but also metabolism, brain health, and longevity. And if you're over the age of 50, this mechanism becomes even more important, because these nutrients help restore something the aging body gradually loses: the ability to turn inflammation off at the source. If this is helpful so far, keep watching, because the next part explains how this single food interacts with the immune system at a cellular level in ways that most people have never heard about. So let's talk about the food itself. The one food that research consistently shows can reduce inflammation faster and more effectively than many common anti-inflammatory spices: fatty fish. Foods like salmon, sardines, mackerel, anchovies, and herring contain high levels of omega-3 fatty acids, specifically two powerful compounds called EPA, eicosapentaenoic acid, and DHA, docosahexaenoic acid. These aren't just healthy fats. They are biological signals that influence how your immune system behaves. Here's what's really going on inside your body. When you consume omega-3 fats, your body converts them into those specialized molecules we talked about earlier: resolvins, protectins, and mycins. Think of these molecules as the body's natural peacekeepers. When inflammation starts, immune cells rush to the site of injury or stress. That's normal, but without a signal telling those immune cells to stop, they can continue releasing inflammatory chemicals long after the threat is gone. That's where resolvins come in. They signal the immune system to stand down. They tell inflammatory cells to stop releasing damaging compounds. And they stimulate the removal of damaged tissue so healing can begin. Research published in the journal Cell Metabolism has shown that omega-3 fatty acids significantly reduce inflammatory cytokines while improving metabolic signaling in immune cells. And another large clinical study in older adults found that omega-3 supplementation reduced C-reactive protein and interleukin-6, two major markers of chronic inflammation associated with aging. In other words, omega-3 fats help restore the natural resolution phase of inflammation. Now, here's something especially important for seniors. Omega-3 fats don't just affect inflammation, they affect cell membranes. Let me explain this with a simple whiteboard analogy. Imagine every cell in your body is surrounded by a protective wall, the cell membrane. That membrane controls what enters the cell and what leaves. If the membrane becomes rigid or inflamed, communication between cells breaks down. Hormones like insulin don't work as effectively, nutrients don't enter efficiently, waste products accumulate, omega-3 fatty acids become part of that membrane. They make it more flexible and responsive. This improves insulin sensitivity, supports brain signaling, and reduces inflammatory stress on tissues. This is why omega-3 intake has been linked with lower risk of cardiovascular disease, cognitive decline, arthritis, metabolic syndrome. For seniors, this effect can be profound, because as we age, cell membranes naturally become less fluid and more inflammatory. Omega-3 fats help restore that balance. Now let's talk about practical application. How much fatty fish do you actually need? Research from organizations like the American Heart Association suggests consuming 2 servings of fatty fish per week. That's roughly 3 to 4 ounces per serving. Examples include wild salmon, sardines, mackerel, anchovies, herring. Sardines, in particular, are one of the most nutrient-dense options. They contain omega-3s, vitamin D, calcium, selenium, and high-quality protein, all nutrients that support aging bodies. And here's a simple habit many longevity experts recommend. Build 2 anti-inflammatory meals each week centered around fatty fish. For example, lunch, sardines with olive oil, leafy greens, and avocado. Dinner, grilled salmon with vegetables and extra virgin olive oil. This combination provides omega-3 fats, polyphenols, fiber, and antioxidants, all working together to calm inflammation. And if this information is helping you understand your body better, consider subscribing to the channel. Every day, we break down the science of nutrition, metabolism, and longevity into practical strategies you can use immediately. Because small habits like this, repeated consistently, can dramatically change the trajectory of your health over time. In the next section, we're going to go even deeper into how inflammation disrupts metabolism and weight regulation, and why reducing inflammation can make fat loss dramatically easier, especially after the age of 50. Now let's go deeper into something many people never connect with inflammation: weight gain and metabolic slowdown. Many seniors say something like this: I'm eating the same way I always have, but suddenly I'm gaining weight. Or, my energy is lower and it feels harder to burn fat than it used to. And often, the hidden driver behind this shift is chronic inflammation. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Inflammation interferes with one of the most important hormones in metabolism, insulin. Insulin's job is simple. After you eat, it helps move glucose from your bloodstream into your cells so that glucose can be used for energy. But when inflammation is present, inflammatory molecules like TNF-alpha and interleukin-6 disrupt insulin signaling pathways. Think of insulin like a messenger knocking on the door of your cells. Under healthy conditions, the door opens easily. But when inflammation rises, it's like someone has jammed the lock. The signal becomes weaker. Glucose remains in the bloodstream longer, and the body responds by producing even more insulin. Now here's the metabolic consequence. High insulin levels tell the body to do 3 things: store fat, stop burning stored fat, increase hunger signals. This is one of the reasons chronic inflammation is strongly linked with metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes. In fact, research published in the journal Diabetes Care shows that elevated inflammatory markers significantly predict the development of insulin resistance over time. But inflammation doesn't just affect insulin. It also affects fat tissue itself. Let me explain this with another simple analogy. Your body fat is not just a storage depot for calories. Fat tissue is actually metabolically active. It releases hormones and signaling molecules. But when fat cells become inflamed, which often happens with aging and poor metabolic health, they begin releasing pro-inflammatory chemicals called adipokines. These adipokines further increase systemic inflammation. So the cycle becomes self-reinforcing. Inflammation, insulin resistance, fat storage, more inflammatory signals. And this cycle is one reason many people struggle to lose weight as they age. Now here's where omega-3 rich foods become incredibly powerful. Omega-3 fatty acids help reduce inflammatory activity in fat tissue. They also improve insulin signaling and metabolic flexibility. A number of clinical studies have shown that higher omega-3 intake is associated with improved insulin sensitivity and lower triglyceride levels. But perhaps even more importantly, omega-3s help calm inflammation in the liver. The liver plays a central role in metabolic health. It regulates blood sugar, it processes fats, and it detoxifies inflammatory compounds. But when the liver becomes inflamed, a condition often linked with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, metabolic health begins to deteriorate quickly. Omega-3 fats help reduce liver fat accumulation and improve lipid metabolism. So when you consistently consume omega-3 rich foods like fatty fish, you are supporting multiple metabolic systems simultaneously: immune regulation, insulin signaling, fat metabolism, liver health. This is why one simple dietary shift can produce noticeable improvements in energy, weight stability, and overall vitality. Now, in the next section, we're going to talk about something practical and actionable, because knowing the science is helpful, but what really matters is how to apply it in daily life. I'm going to show you a simple weekly anti-inflammatory protocol that many longevity experts recommend for people over 50, and it's surprisingly easy to implement. Now let's move from theory to something practical, because understanding the science is important. But what truly changes health is consistent daily habits. So the question becomes, how can seniors use this information to actively reduce inflammation every week? Let me show you a simple protocol that many nutrition scientists and longevity researchers recommend. Think of it as an anti-inflammatory rhythm for the body. Step 1 is surprisingly simple. Eat fatty fish 2 to 3 times per week. This is the most reliable way to ensure your body receives enough EPA and DHA, the omega-3 fats needed to produce those inflammation-resolving molecules we discussed earlier. Examples of ideal choices include wild salmon, sardines, mackerel, anchovies, herring. Among these, sardines are particularly powerful. They are small fish, which means they accumulate fewer environmental toxins, and they provide an incredible combination of nutrients: omega-3 fats, vitamin D, calcium, selenium, and high-quality protein. Now let me explain something important about consistency. Omega-3 fatty acids gradually incorporate into the membranes of your cells. This process takes time. Think of it like slowly upgrading the materials that build your body's cells. With regular intake, those cell membranes become more flexible, less inflammatory, and more responsive to hormones like insulin. But this improvement doesn't happen from one meal. It happens from repeated exposure over weeks and months. Now here's step 2 of the protocol. Combine omega-3 foods with polyphenol-rich plants. These include foods like leafy greens, berries, olive oil, green tea, walnuts. Polyphenols help reduce oxidative stress, which is another major driver of inflammation. You can think of oxidative stress as biological rust forming inside the body. Polyphenols act like protective shields that prevent that damage from spreading. When omega-3 fats and polyphenols are consumed together, they create a powerful anti-inflammatory synergy. For example, a meal of grilled salmon, spinach, olive oil, and berries provides omega-3 fats, fiber, antioxidants, and polyphenols, all working together to calm inflammatory pathways. Step 3 is something many people overlook. Balance omega-3 intake with lower omega-6 overload. Modern diets contain extremely high levels of omega-6 fats, often from processed seed oils used in packaged foods and fast food. Now, omega-6 fats are not inherently bad. The body actually needs them. But the problem is the ratio. Historically, humans consumed roughly a 1.1 ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fats. Today, many diets contain ratios closer to 15.1 or even 20.1. This imbalance promotes inflammatory signaling. By increasing omega-3 intake and reducing ultra-processed foods, you restore a healthier balance in the body. And here's where the call to action naturally fits. If this information is helping you understand your body in a new way, consider subscribing to the channel. Every day we break down complex health science into practical strategies you can use to support metabolism, longevity, and disease prevention naturally. Because the goal is not perfection. The goal is small biological improvements repeated consistently. Over time, those small changes compound into powerful results. In the next section, we're going to discuss something incredibly important for seniors: how inflammation affects the brain, and why the same nutrients that protect the heart and metabolism can also play a powerful role in protecting memory, focus, and long-term cognitive health. Now let's talk about something that concerns many people as they age: brain health. Because inflammation doesn't only affect joints, metabolism, or the heart. One of the organs most sensitive to chronic inflammation is the brain. And what scientists are discovering is that many forms of cognitive decline are closely linked to neuroinflammation, inflammation inside the brain itself. Here's what's really going on. The brain has its own immune cells called microglia. Their job is to protect the brain from infections and clean up damaged cells. But when inflammation in the body remains elevated for years, those microglia become overactive. Instead of simply protecting the brain, they begin releasing inflammatory chemicals that can damage neurons. Over time, this inflammatory environment can interfere with communication between brain cells. Memory becomes less sharp, focus becomes harder, and the brain becomes more vulnerable to neurodegenerative diseases. Research published in the journal Neurology has shown that higher levels of systemic inflammation are associated with faster cognitive decline in older adults. Now, here's where omega-3 fatty acids play an extraordinary role. Remember one of the compounds we discussed earlier, DHA. DHA is not just another nutrient, it is actually one of the primary structural fats in the brain. Nearly 30–40% of the polyunsaturated fats in the brain are DHA. This means the brain literally uses DHA to build and maintain neuronal membranes. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine brain cells communicating like two people sending messages across a bridge. If the bridge is stable and well maintained, messages travel quickly and clearly. But if the bridge becomes damaged or unstable, communication slows down. Inflammation weakens those bridges. DHA helps rebuild and stabilize them. It supports membrane flexibility, improves signaling between neurons, and reduces inflammatory activity in the brain. In fact, several large observational studies have shown that people who consume more omega-3 rich fish tend to have lower risk of cognitive decline and better preservation of brain volume with aging. Researchers at institutions like Harvard and the National Institutes of Health have repeatedly found associations between higher DHA levels and healthier brain aging. But there's another fascinating mechanism. Omega-3 fats also help increase levels of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, often called BDNF. BDNF acts like fertilizer for brain cells. It helps neurons grow, repair, and form new connections. Higher BDNF levels are associated with better memory, learning capacity, and resilience against cognitive decline. So when seniors regularly consume omega-3 rich foods like fatty fish, they are not just calming inflammation in the body. They are supporting brain repair and neural communication. Now here's something practical you can start doing immediately. Try pairing omega-3 rich foods with brain-supportive nutrients like leafy greens rich in folate, blueberries rich in anthocyanins, walnuts rich in polyphenols, extra